Howdy, it's Kyle with another installment of Examining Interesting Maps. This is part 11 in the series and the third where I take a look at maps made by viewers of the channel. I'll leave a link in the description to the other 10 in the series, but this is part 11, Examining Interesting Maps, maps made by the viewers. I'm going to start off with a couple of maps made by Nicole S. from the University of Minnesota. This first one shows cows per square mile in each county in the U.S. So immediately you see a huge concentration of cattle going right down the Great Plains of the U.S., but also up into Wisconsin, big dairy country, and the San Joaquin Valley in California, also big dairy country. And I'm a little surprised by that large cluster of cattle in central Kentucky. And here's another one by Nicole that shows age ratio by county. Now I'm not really sure what the numbers in the legend mean, but the darker purple ones have an older population and the lighter color ones are younger, and the absolute oldest ones in the country are those neon green ones. So no big surprise with the oldest counties being in Florida and Arizona, a lot of retirees, but also up in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. And from the previous map you saw in the Great Plains that was where there were so many cows. Well, that's also where there's an older population. And in general, the West and the Southwest is the youngest part of the country except for those big retirement hotspots. So thank you, Nicole, for submitting your maps. They look really nice. This next map was submitted by Klaus B. and shows his personal flight path on a solo flight he took in 1992. The base map is an FAA sectional aeronautical chart with the personal flight path overlaid. Now, I don't know a whole lot about planes, but that's a pretty small plane, so doing what he did is kind of like the equivalent of me doing a road trip cross-country. But you can see in the middle of the map how he went straight south, probably to avoid going over the highest peaks in the Rockies. He flew out to LA, looks like he landed maybe in Van Nuys or Burbank, but returned a different route. And that had to be quite the adventure for a solo pilot in a small plane, so thanks again, Klaus, for sending me this map. From Klaus B to Klaus H, who sent me this map. And this is a digital elevation map for the German state of Hesse. And to make this map, he used digital elevation model data with 25-meter resolution to show the parts of the state that have the higher elevations. He also put the 10 largest cities in the state on the map to show you that most of the people in the state live where the elevations are low. And that includes the big Frankfurt metropolitan area and the Main River Valley. So you can see the highest elevations in the state are kind of in the center at just under 1,000 meters or about 3,000 feet. Didn't really think I'd get two good maps sent by people named Klaus, but thank you very much, Klaus H. This next map was sent to me by Jacob O from Denmark, and this shows population growth by area between the two previous censuses. During that 10-year stretch, the population growth in the U.S. was 7.4%, so the areas highlighted in pink or red grew, but grew at a lower rate than 7.4%, and the areas highlighted in green, especially dark green, grew at more than 7.4%. So you can see a general trend that we've seen over the past 5 years. So what you saw in this previous decade was the Northeast was still gaining a little bit of population, but generally was growing a lot slower, and we're gradually moving southeast. And he also highlights where you had the highest population increase for that decade, which was North Las Vegas, Nevada, and the sharpest population decrease over that decade was Mid-City, New Orleans, Louisiana. So thank you, Jacob, for submitting this map, a Danish map creator doing a map about U.S. population growth. This next map was submitted by Max S. from La Crosse, Wisconsin, and this is his completely subjective map showing the cultural regions of the upper Midwest. And I've been sent maps kind of like this that show things similar to this, but I thought this one was just much more detailed, and he seemed to know a lot more about the region than some of the other ones I've seen for different regions. So there are lots of different categories he shows here, and overall I think the aesthetic of the map is very nice. And so you can see along the northern area you have Northwoods, Great Lakes, and Great Lakes Northwoods combined. And I think what that shows is the counties that are just Great Lakes don't have a lot of forest cover, but the ones that are Great Lakes and Northwoods are ones that have a lot of forest. The ones that are dark green have a lot of forest but aren't along the Great Lakes. But there are a lot of other things he shows there, including the big Chicago-Milwaukee megalopolis, the Twin Cities metro area, central farmland, and he gets really detailed with the bluffs and the driftless area. So if you're from the Midwest, take a good look at this map and let Max know in the comment section if he did a good job. But yeah, Max, thanks for submitting this map. The next map was sent to me by Neil S., who's a GIS technician, and this map was made using ArcGIS software. And it shows exactly what it says, Chicago buildings by date constructed. And so right away you can see it's a very nice looking map, very professionally done. You can tell Neil knows what he's doing. It can be hard to see on a small screen, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit to more of the central part of the city. The northwest part of this map where it's light green is where you had a lot of growth in the early 20th century, and these were largely European immigrant neighborhoods. But you can also see a lot of bright red throughout different parts of the map. These are much more recent developments. And then I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. This is just to the downtown area. So you can see quite a bit of recent growth. There's a lot of red downtown. So even though downtown Chicago has a lot of old areas, there are a lot of new buildings going up as well. And there's still plenty of new things going up right now. So in a few years, this map will have even a little more red on it. So thank you, Neil, for submitting this map. It looks really nice. Okay, next up is a map submitted by John S. This is a population density map, but done a little bit differently than most others. So how this one is done is that each color represents 10% of the U.S. population. So all of the dark green counties combined add up to 10% of the U.S. population. And that's in contrast to just the small handful of counties that are dark blue that also represent 10% of the population. So there are 10 different shades of green and blue used on this map. Each one is 10% of the total population. So this map shows some nice data, but also looks really nice with the various shades of green and blue. Thanks a lot, John. Okay, these next couple of maps were sent to me by ZZ from Germany, showing info on cell phones and income worldwide. What this first map shows is how many cell phone subscription you have relative to the GDP per capita of that country. This uses the assumption that people in rich countries are more likely to have a cell phone and people in poor countries are less likely to have one. So ultimately what this shows is countries highlighted in red are where you have more cell phones than you would expect based on the income of that country, and where you have yellow is where you have less. So in many poor countries you have a good cell phone network, and many people do have modern smartphones. And then you have countries such as Canada, Norway, and some of the rich countries in the Middle East that have perhaps fewer cell phones than you might expect for a country with that wealth. ZZ sent me several maps showing global cell phone subscriptions for various years, and the oldest one was for 1990. So I find it interesting that you go back this far, just the US, Canada, the UK, Northern Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and the UAE, plus maybe Switzerland were the first ones to really go big on cell phone coverage. And if you want to check out more maps made by ZZ, you can check out this website here. Thanks a lot, ZZ, for sending me these maps. Okay, these next two maps were sent to me by longtime viewer Joe. This first one shows Walmart locations by state. And it highlights Texas as being the state with the most, with over 600. And it also shows that DC is the one with the fewest. I can't believe there are even 5 in DC. For the most part, this is kind of a population density map, but certain states, including Mississippi and New Jersey, kind of buck that trend. But this next map that Joe sent showing Cracker Barrel locations I think is a little more interesting. I was a little surprised to see Florida being number 1 with 60, but it makes sense because my wife and I refer to Cracker Barrel as the old folks meeting place, so that makes sense for Florida being number 1. I also find it interesting that Oregon has at least 5, but Washington has none. And for Minnesota to only have 1 is a lot less than you would think for a state that size. But overall, it looks like the interior west or the mountain time zone is kind of where Cracker Barrel is the least popular. But Joe, thanks again for submitting these maps. And like I've done in previous videos highlighting viewer maps, I'm saving the best for last. These are from Kendall, who's a Canadian GIS tech. And I feel pretty bad because she sent me these maps for consideration for the previous Interesting Maps video, but I only saw the first file and not the other ones that she sent. And here's the map that she sent me. It's an okay map. It shows water pipe risk assessment for a town in Illinois. It looks nice, it's well presented, the legend shows what needs to be shown, but I just didn't select it for the previous video. However, it was later on that I realized that there were actually several attachments to that email that show some of the best maps I've been sent since doing these viewer map videos. She sent me several, but I wanted to highlight a couple of my favorites. This one shows the Arctic Ocean and the major rivers and watersheds that feed into it. The colors on the map are the watersheds of each of these major rivers. It can be a little hard to see, but in the upper right corner of the map, it ranks the rivers in terms of its discharge volumes. Generally speaking, the rivers coming from Russia are feeding into the Arctic Ocean more than the rivers from Canada. So this is just a really cool map showing Arctic hydrology. And here's another one that she made. It's a digital elevation map for the Grand Canyon in Arizona. So here's a quote verbatim from her email as to how she makes these maps. And you can tell by reading that there's a lot that goes into making a nice looking map like these. And this one of the Grand Canyon shows all kinds of nice detail, a nice overhead shot in the upper left corner. It's nicely labeled with some of the major features of the canyon. It highlights the village and the entrances. So overall, just a very high quality map that's made by someone that knows what they're doing. And this is the third map of Kendall's that I wanted to highlight for this video, which shows hiking trails in a public park. So even though this map isn't as spectacular as some of the other ones, you can tell that a skilled hand made this one. Just the overall design, the look, the colors used, and how it's overlaid with an elevation map. I've seen plenty of park maps like these that were done by just a park employee or by someone that doesn't really know how to do maps very well that often don't look that good, but you can tell by this one, if you went to this park, you wouldn't get lost on these trails. So Kendall, if you happen to be watching, I apologize for missing the attachments from your previous email, but you made some really good maps and I'm glad to have shown them in this video. So that was part 11 of examining interesting maps. If you would like to submit a map for consideration for the next one in the series, I'll leave a link in the description as to how to contact me for that. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up to let me know you approve, and subscribe to this channel if you're interested in learning more about geography from a nerd. But yeah, thanks for watching. Geography King, signing out. I'd like to give a special thanks to my superior patrons for their support. If you're interested in supporting the channel, you can check out my Patreon page with the link in the description. As always, thank you very much.